I wanted to clarify what I said yesterday, just in case I confused more people. And I think one of the real points about oxidating fat versus lipolysis, which is like breaking down of fat, is that your body uses different types of fuels for different intensity levels. So there's that one aspect of it. So there is a little bit of a nuance here, but let me give it to you as straightly and as plainly and as straightforwardly as I can, because it doesn't need to be more complicated. Your understanding doesn't have to be more complicated than this. When you first go from seated to standing, that initial quick movement is driven by energy that's already stored in those muscles, usually in the form of glycogen, which is as a muscle sugar stored in your muscles, which is different than your blood sugar. Again, let me not digress, because I don't want to get into a 4-year physiology degree with you. But so your first step, stand up, you've used glycogen. Now, if you keep walking, at some point, your body kicks into it almost exclusively fat as a fuel source. That doesn't happen until your body has time to ramp up. And for those of you guys who know chemistry or biology, there's a few cycles that happen in the cell. It has to turn over a certain amount of times before you can start using fat as a fuel source. Oxygen needs to be coming in, and this thing happens. If you cannot get enough oxygen into the cells to be able to perform this function, you're working at a high intensity. And you're using almost predominantly blood sugars. For those of you guys who recognize the zones, zone 1, 2, 3 is predominantly fat burning. As you get higher in the zones, it becomes more and more sugars, glycogen, and that sort of thing, all the way to a level 5, a zone 5, where it's pretty much exclusively sugars. Now, the difference is a level 5, you cannot run at a level 5, zone 5, for half an hour. You can't. This is a sprint. This is 100 meter. This is a short distance. Maybe you're running in soccer. You're running to the ball. That's potentially a zone 5, but it's not something you can keep up. So it's almost like a firecracker. You use this energy, and then you're sort of relying on the other systems again. Whereas something a little bit less intensity, so let's say you're jogging around the field the whole time, walking, jogging, you're not really sprinting at any point, you're predominantly using zones 2 and 3 most likely. Maybe peaking into 4 every once in a while. Now, that being said, lower zones are predominantly fat as a fuel source. Your body has time to use the oxygen to pull the fat from different parts of your body and have a reaction to use that to break the energy that's stored in those molecules, to use that to fuel your activity. Now, the breakdown of fat should not be confused for the use of fat. And I hope that I helped you guys understand that, because your body's constantly breaking and building different things. Whether those things get used or not has a lot to do with the type of activity you're doing, as I just mentioned, but also your calorie status, your calorie balance status. If you're in prolonged periods of calorie deficit, your body will start to use fat as the predominant fuel source for the energy it takes. So it's actually using the fat that you have stored. The problem is it also is using the other stored molecules as well. So if you're suddenly moving around, it's those quick movements, your body doesn't have time to break down fat for a quick movement, so it's using the sugar that's stored. In some cases, it's using protein as a fuel source. And protein is the only thing that can't be created in some way in your body. There is some essential ones that you can create, but for predominantly you're taking them in from your diets. And now, as you're taking them in, you're replenishing them because your body's using them for different things. If you're not replenishing the protein, there's more going out than coming in, this is when you're losing, you're using bone mass or you're losing muscle mass. This is the problem with not having enough protein when you're in a calorie deficit. That's why it's so important. Now, I don't want to get stuck in the weeds here for you guys, but the whole point is the zones, how intensely you're working defines what energy source you're using. But just because you're fueling up with a certain type of fuel doesn't mean you're using that fuel. It's not like a car, right? You're taking in the fuel and then you're using it as needed. That depends on your drive. Now, there is the ability and different body types slightly that, let's say you take in more sugar, your body likes to use sugar. You take in more fat, your body likes to use fat, and it can get used to either or. This is why the keto people argue for keto, because your body prefers fat after a certain period of time of training it to do so. So it's constantly using fat more often. But using fat more often has nothing to do with losing fat. Losing fat can only happen in a calorie deficit. I'm going to cut it short. If you have any questions, hopefully I didn't confuse you, it actually helped you. Please send me a message and I can help to clarify that further.